Hello everyone, again, welcome to the abilities tuning update. Now, I'm going to be frank, I am still sick. It's gotten worse since the last video I put out, so I would just say bear with me. I will do my best to not sound like hell. Starting off the bat, the 2 points or 3 points to get to is basically buffs to Stasis ability, including a new keyword or subclass verb, as some people might know, Frost Armor, the near future of Well and Ward of Dawn, as well as subclass by subclass breakdown, changes and all of that, including with Prismatic, because I guess they made some changes afterwards. Now, I'm gonna try to do my best to ignore all of this, but just go off of what they say. New Frost Armor keyword. You are fortified by layers of durable stasis matter, reducing incoming damage. Frost Armor damage resistance grows as you gain additional stacks. Reduces damage from PvE combatants by 4.5% per stack and enemies by 2% per stack. So this isn't going to be like, what's the word? Woven Mail or Void Armor, where it's just one straight up thing that you have a flat damage reduction. You gain more and more stacks, you get more and more damage reduction. Whisper of Rhyme no longer grants a Stasis Shard Overshield, but however now increases the maximum duration and stack count of Frost Armor. Now, actually, I will double back for some description. Frost Armor is a stacking buff that reduces incoming damage with greater damage as your stacks increased. At launch, Frost Armor will be granted from a variety of sources, including Tectonic, Grim, and Glacial Harvest aspects, fragments, and exotic armors. I imagine Icefall might do that now. By default, you can build to a maximum number of 5 stacks that last 9 seconds, but with the newly reworked Whisper of Rhyme fragment, Frost Armor's lifespan increases to 13 seconds and can build up to a maximum of 8 stacks. Unlike Stasis Shard Overshield, Frost Armor remains active when your super is cast, though its effectiveness is significantly lower while your super is active. Now, moving forward, new aspects like they just said, Grim, Tectonic, and Glacial Harvest is equipped. Stasis Shards grant a small amount of health, as well as stacks of Frost Armor, while large Stasis Shards from Grim Harvest grant more health and Frost Armor stacks. But that is specifically Grim Harvest, which if I recall is the Hunter version, so keep an eye out for that. All Harvest aspects now have a standardized cooldown with a large number of shards are created very quickly. Tectonic Harvest now creates a Stasis Shard when shattering a frozen target in addition to shattering Stasis Crystals. Our intention with Frost Armor that can be granted through a variety of sources. As part of this, we've updated Renewal Grasp and Ballador's Wrathweavers to directly grant Frost Armor, rather than using their own custom damage resistance or Stasis Shard Overshield. Renewal Grasps, on entering your Dustfield Grenade volume, you and an ally gain a stack of Frost Armor about every 0.9 seconds while in said grenade. An additional Frost Armor is granted, resetting your timer. And with Ballador's, replace the Stasis Shard Overshield with Frost Armor when you activate your Rift and use Winter's Wrath Shatter attack. Interesting. Then as well, Whisper of Chills. Stasis Weapon Final Blows have a chance to create a Stasis Shard. Interesting. That is brand new all the way through. Let's see, next we have Whisper of Change. No longer grants passive damage resistance when near a Stasis Crystal or with frozen target. Now grants a chance to create a Stasis Shard when defeating a target that you have one or more stack of Frost Armor. So they are definitely adding more and more ways to just keep this ball rolling. Whisper of Fractures no longer increases melee energy regeneration when surrounded, now grants a stack of Frost Armor when you shatter any frozen target with a melee attack. Whisper of Torment, grenade energy gains are no longer dependent on your current health value. Base grenade energy regeneration amount per damage event increasing from 5 to 7, so a slight buff. While you have Frost Armor, energy per damage increases from 7 to 12. That does sound wonderful. Whisper of Reversal, while you have Frost Armor, dealing damage or receiving physical melee, no longer projectile melee damages, slows your victims or attacker. Then as well as Stasis Shatter specifically increases base PvE shatter from 200 to 400. Fixed an issue where bosses auto shattering were being hit by 2 instances of shatter damage, and fixed an issue where players in active super would show immune damage flyouts when automatically breaking in a stasis freeze. Now that is everything for general stasis, so not gonna lie, right off the bat, it sounds great because Frost Armor is going to be the way that Stasis can actually be viable for the endgame. Because up until now, every single subclass had form of damage reduction or healing. The only bit that Stasis had was the Shard Overshield, which already was quite lacking compared to Void, which already reduces damage. Now, specifically for the Warlocks, Ice Flare Bolt buff increased the maximum number of Seekers created before going on cooldown from 5 to 7. I'm going to enjoy that. For the Hunter, Winter Shroud. Slowing targets briefly increases your class ability regeneration rate. Bonus is reduced in PvP, of course. Now grants PvE damage reduction when activated. Nice. So that is the dodge creates a slow burst, if you don't know what that is. For Touch of Winter on the Hunters, Glacier Grenade adds an additional stasis crystal to the ring formation, increasing total count to 7. The Glacier Grenade ring now forms over point to 7 seconds rather than instantly. Interesting. The Cold Snap Grenade no longer chains an additional time when Touch of Winter is equipped. Instead, Seekers now duplicate when they freeze a target. Second and third Seeker chains now create a medium and large stasis crystal respectively, rather than every chain creating a small crystal. Then for the Silence and Squall Hunter Super, increases Squall maximum travel speed by 10%. Squall Storms now slow down when any target is within an area of effect to reduce instances where it could overshoot its target. Increases damage and slow tick versus PvE combatants by 40%, bringing its freeze time from approximately 0.8 to 0.5 seconds. Oof. For our Stasis Titans, Shiver Strike increases damage versus PvE combatants by 10%, increases size of melee target search area cone by about 50, increases maximum lunge tracking angular speed from 7 degrees per second to 21 per second, and the Titan Stasis Super now automatically begins sprinting when the player throttles forward. Cryoclasm removes sprint time reduction. Cryoclasm now goes on cooldown for 4 seconds after one extended slide, which is the Shattering Slide. For Diamond Lance, increase thrown Diamond Lance detonation radius from 3.5 to 5 meters, increase slam detonation radius from 6.75 to 8 meters versus PvE combatants. Diamond Lance now shatters stasis crystals on direct impact. Pickup interaction time from 0.2 seconds to 0.1, matching Strain Tangles, and Diamond Lance pickup interaction radius to 3 meters, also matching Strain Tangles. So, that seems spicy. Now, back in November, briefly touched on Well of Radiance and Worn of Dawn have been evaluating their place in the sandbox. With the launch of the final shape, we're making some larger changes to both of these supers to push them into more distinct identities and to reduce the fire and forget nature of Well of Radiance. Uh-oh, big nerf, I'm assuming. Well of Radiance now grants Radiant for 8 seconds when players exit the well. Interesting. Reduced player survivability when standing in the well aura. Reduced healing per second from 100 to 50 health points, matching restoration times 2. Increases healing on cast from 400 to 300. Reduced damage resistance versus non-boss combatants from 40 to 20, and versus boss from 40 to 10. Note, damage resistance versus players is unchanged. Increases maximum orbs from defeating targets while in your well from 4 to 5. Interesting. So it heals more on cast, it has less damage resistance, and you gain radiant for a little bit while outside of the well, but also the healing per second is down. Interesting ways of reworking that. Then again, I think with Prismatic going forward, we will probably have a lot of more options. For the Ward of Dawn, removed Armor of Light Overshield. Ward of Dawn now immediately applies a full Void Overshield to the caster and the allies that enter its dome. Armor of Light now instead grants additional damage resistance to players inside of Ward of Dawn, 30% versus players and 60% in PvE. Effective health of players inside the Ward of Dawn dome remains roughly the same as it was before PvE combatants. Effective health of players inside the dome is significantly lower than it was versus players in PvP. It cannot be further increased by stacking Bastion barricades inside the ward to gain additional overshield layers. Looking at you trials, folks that span the ward. Allies near the Ward of Dawn dome now have Void Overshields trickled over time, similar to the volume behind a Bastion barricade. No longer provides Weapons of Light by default, as behavior has been moved into the benefits of the Helm of Saint 14. Oh. That seems hurting. Like, as much as Saint 14 has more usefulness now, man, Ward of Dawn, I feel like, is going to suffer from that. The Ward of Dawn caster can now generate additional orbs of power by defeating enemies with melee attacks in or near their Ward of Dawn dome. Straight out, I don't discredit the need to change this for PvP. A lot of the changes for the Ward of Dawn, I feel like, was solely for the PvP crowd from the people that just spammed it at any point because it was a quick cooldown super. That last bit about no longer providing Weapons of Light by default, that is going to hurt a lot. And I mean a lot. Just because, thinking of Void, there's so many other things that people can run with Void that they can have free and use a thing. They can Synthecept, Actium War Raid for the fun. There's lots of options when running Ward of Dawn because of what it could give. Now, you're forcing everyone to use Saint 14 if you want Weapons of Light. And at the same time, I feel like not many people are going to be using a Ward of Dawn as a result of that. In PvE, that is. I don't feel like that last bit was required at all. I get it's a change that makes 14 more relevant, but at the same time, it never really was in this day and age. Now for arc stuff. Hunters. Arc Staff. Heavy strikes and heavy air slams blind enemies now. Disorienting blow, decreasing base cooldown time by 10 seconds. And Tempest Strike adds additional damage resistance versus PvE combatants when activated, lingering for a short duration afterwards. For Arc Warlock, Lightning Surge added additional damage resistance versus PvE combatants when activated, lingering for a short duration. Nice. Ball Strike increases the final arming shape size by 30%. Fixed an issue where the arming shape was offset upward, higher than the maximum damage range of the projectile's detonation. Chain Lightning increases secondary chain projectiles base damage from 27 to 54. Thunderclap on Titan added additional damage resistance versus PvE and lingering for a short duration. Increases minimum damage versus PvE combatants by 20% and maximum damage by 33 and against players by 14. My oh my. Now the big change to knockouts. Let's see. Increases bonus damage. Increased bonus damage granted to the powered melee attacks versus PvE commands by 50%. Reworked its healing behavior. No longer unstuns health regeneration on melee defeats. Now instantly grants a chunk of healing that scales with the type of target defeater. A player will grant you 30 health, minor 50, major 75, and champion plus 100 health points. For the Touch of Thunder, the Storm Grenade specifically increases track and travel speed when targeting PvE combatants between 0.5 and 1 meters per second, increasing the Storm's lifetime. Interesting. The Touch of Thunder Lightning Grenade now applies Jolt after the first damage event rather than prior. Interesting, because I like running those after the nerf to Storm Grenades. Arc Grenades in general. The Storm Grenade increases damage versus PvE combatants by 20%. Touch of Thunder variant is unchanged specifically. Skip Grenade buffed by 15%. And Arc Bolt by 15% as well, all in PvE. The Arc Fragments, Spark of Recharge, ability regeneration bonus now persists until the player returns to full shields, rather than deactivating as soon as shields begin to recharge. The Spark of Beacons now also triggers on defeating targets with Arc Power ammo when amplified. Spark of Frequency now also grants additional stability on powered melee hit in addition to its reload benefit. Interesting. Now for the solar bits for the Hunter. The Lightweight, aka the most useless knife, now has 2 melee charges by default. Increases throw animation speed by 33%. Reduce suppression time between throws so both knives can be thrown quickly back to back. The additional melee charge is not stacked with the video space. Due to the exotic's unique ability, unique energy recharge behavior, we'll be monitoring this and evaluate how things work from things going live. Knock 'em down. Reduced internal cooldown on throwing knife refund from 0.1 seconds to 0.2 seconds. So yes, it's possible that we get our knives back more consistently. I've always been looking out for that. Golden Gun Marksman. Reduced strength of orbs of power created on precision hits. Oof, that is for all the people doing 6 times Star Eater scales Golden Guns. I don't think you'll be able to do that now on. When hitting non-boss enemies, reduce strength from 0.75 to 0.5 of a normal super orb of power. When hitting boss enemies, from 0.75 to 0.4. When hitting boss enemies while Star Eater scales equipped, reduced from 0.7 to 0.3. Yep, they're definitely hammering that, so you can't just straight up go nothing but supers on damage phases anymore. Consecration. Consecration's ground slam attack can now shatter stasis crystals. Woo. Ignitions generated by Consecration deal 20% additional damage to DVE. Fixed an issue where Consecration's slam attack was sometimes unable to damage floating combatants when they were grounded. It fixed an issue where Consecration's intended PvE damage resistance was not being applied. More buffs to Consecration. I love the sound of that. Hammer of Soul. Increased projectile submunition count when Soul Invictus is not equipped as follows. If the projectile detonates within the first 0.5 seconds or 0.7 seconds of its lifetime, it creates 4 shrapnel submunitions. After the first 0.7, it creates 6. And note, when Soul Invictus is equipped, only 3 shrapnel submunitions are created regardless of flight time. Shrapnel submunitions now deal additional damage when Soul Invictus is not equipped, and they dealing damage with the damage increasing at the first 0.7 seconds. Interesting. So I guess they're trying to make hammers not so close proximity, or at least get some benefit from using range. Then the Swarm Grenade. Increased tracking shape size from 4 to 6 meters, increased lingering duration to 10 to 11 seconds, and increased damage versus PvE combatants by 20%. For the Void subclass going on, the Snare Bomb, the most useless melee. Increased lingering duration of smoke after detonating from 3 to 5. Now applies small damage over time to enemies in smoke, which increases the strength the longer they remain in smoke. Honestly, we just need an additional Void melee. Give them another form of... Give them a poison knife. Give them something other than the smoke bomb, please. Trapper's Ambush. Increase the lingering duration of the smoke after detonation from 4.5 to 6 seconds. Now apply the snare bomb's damage over time to enemies caught in the smoke. Fix an issue where Trapper's Ambush smoke effects could be obstructed by ground geometry. Stylist Executioner. Weaken effect can now be applied by glaive melee attacks. Interesting. For Titans, the Shield Throw. Increased maximum bounce count from 4 to 5. Increased maximum lifetime from 3 to 4 seconds. Increased its tracking shape, size, and strength after each bounce, increasing its ability to consistently find new targets. Slightly increasing gravity and decreasing thrust speed with each bounce. Increases damage versus PvE targets by 20%. For the offensive bulwark aspect, can now only extend Void Overshield's timer to its normal maximum duration to prevent an issue where players could get into a bad timer state. Now it regenerates a small portion of your active Void Overshield each melee defeat. For Warlock, Chaos Accelerant, the Charged Magnetic Grenade increases maximum intensity of physics knockback impulse by 10%, increases damage specifically by 20%, and now passively decreases your magnetic grenade cooldown by 10% when Chaos Accelerant is equipped. I guess they're really trying to make Warlocks use magnetic grenades. The Melee Pocket Singularity increases detonation damage by 50% in PvE. Nova Bomb Cataclysm. More Seekers on detonation, and fix an issue where Seekers could impact the environment on creation. The Vortex variant increases linger duration from 7 to 10 seconds, and fix an issue where the linger effects were shutting off early. So buffs all around for the Void side, as well as most of the Solar. Now for Strand. Thread of Warding reduces woven mail duration on Orb of Power from 10 to 5. I suppose, yeah, that was a bit of a length. For Hunter, Ensnaring Slam. Detonation volume versus enemy players is now a cylinder with a 6.5 meter radius rather than a sphere with an 8 meter radius. This results in fewer instances of victims correctly attempting to counterplay by jumping, but being caught by the Ensnaring Slam detonation high up in thin air. Similarly, Threaded Spike reduces damage versus players from 79 to 70, and Catch Your Threaded Spike no longer breaks invisibility. Interesting. For the Warlock, they added new behavior to Weaver's Call. Defeating targets with strand damage now has a chance to generate a perched threadling, with a higher chance of generation for defeating more powerful targets. This damage can be from any source, including other threadlings, so more threadlings on the field. Grapple Tangles and Melee. Grapple Tangles no longer fully refresh their duration when grappled to. I'm not sure what, well, I guess that makes sense. Now increases their duration by a maximum of 5 seconds per grapple, reducing the maximum, reducing to a maximum of 1 second added after 5 consecutive grapples to the same grapple tangle. Let's see, what is this meant for? No longer fully refresh when a player uses them. Instead, they have a flat number of seconds. I guess this is to make, reduce grapple spam. Then Titans, Looping to Berserker. Into the Fray reduces melee energy regeneration scalar from 4 to 3 times in PvE activities, unchanged in PvP. Interesting. I forget what Into the Fray does. I don't think that's Banner of War, specifically. I think Into the Fray is, God, I'm derping out. Moving on. Banner of War reduces maximum timer from 30 seconds to 24. Still a lot of time. Melee, Glaive Melee, and Super Damage bonus now have diminishing returns with Syntheseps as follows. Melee bonuses decrease from 1.4 to 1.15. Glaive Melee bonus down from 1.25 to 1.25, or 1.125, and Super bonus decrease from 1.4 to 1.2. But again, this is specifically with Syntheseps, so keep that in mind. Melee and Glaive Melee damage bonuses now have diminishing returns with Warden God's Caress as well. Melee bonuses decrease from 1.4 to 1.1 based on stacks, and Glaive Melee bonus decrease from 1.4 to 1.05 based on stacks. Frenzied Blade reduces the forward offset for melee lunge target point from 0.4 to 0.18. I guess this is making sure that we don't jump too far past things. And with that, that is the conclusion of abilities. So yeah, going back through the topic points, just really quickly. All of the Frost Armor, that sounds great. There didn't seem to be any nerfs that really changed anything. Yes, as much as I did enjoy some of the shards as they were, reworking them definitely seemed worth it, considering Stasis hasn't been touched in quite a while. And again, I will reiterate, Frost Armor is really good because Stasis didn't have any form of damage reduction or healing beforehand, and now it has a slight healer and definitely a damage reduction. It's just to be seen how effective it truly is. Then, on the topic of every individual bit, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't not expect the change to Well or Dawn. I expected a nerf to Well, and it seems appropriate. Less healing per second, less damage resistance, more health on cast just to make sure it's emergency, and more orbs. you know, it felt appropriate considering, again, we kind of got into that power creep where Well of Radiance was the go-to for practically everything. The Ward of Dawn, what happened was, again, all PvP focused. 100% I can tell just from the buffs that was made. Now, the PvE part, the only part that I see as all a negative was, again, the Weapons of Light thing. Just because this was iconic for Ward of Dawn, and it made it easy to pick a random exotic, have a build, and throw in a Ward of Dawn just for the safety, as opposed to going something more offensively. And now, it's just, I don't even think this is going to show an up use of Saint 14. I think it might just reduce the usefulness of Ward of Dawn. But aside from that, everything arc sounded good. There was nothing but buffs there. Literally nothing but buffs, really, that I can think of. Of course, Knockout did get a little bit reworked, but I think this was, again, for the PvP crowd. Touch of Thunder, a slight buff, as well as more of that, more buffs for grenades, and everything else. Again, all of it just seemed straight up buff. I didn't expect the buff to lightweight knife. That was just straight up the worst knife, always. Golden Gun, I kind of expected this one because of after how many clips of GSX Clyde, just 6 Golden Gun, Star Eater, melting Pantheon bosses at like a -15 light deficit. Yeah, I was seeing this buffed pretty soon. I know it's been happening since last season with Crota, or even prior, but I was not surprised by that. Then as well, Consecration buff, always happy. Hammer long range buff, good. And of course, Swarm Grenades, this is, I think, the most ignored Solar Grenade possibly. It needed a buff. And all the Void changes, honestly, there isn't anything terrible there. I didn't expect the Magnetic Grenade buff. I kind of just considered that the Red-Headed Stepchild had ignored of Void Grenades. Honestly, I do think they need to, as much as damage over time on the Snare Bomb is nifty, I think they just need a straight-up Thrown Poison Dagger for Void Hunters. That is the only thing that makes sense. An additional melee as opposed to Smoke Bombs and making another knife. Every class has some way to use a melee, or at least has a melee ability. This one just throws a smoke bomb and essentially farts on your enemies. But from that point, I heard somebody in my Discord say that they killed Woven Mail. This is an individual change to one thread or one fragment. This is not at all a killing Woven Mail. Yes, it is a nerf, but at the same time, with the amount of orbs in the field, this is nothing, and how many ways you can get Woven Mail, again, it's really easy to keep up nowadays. The changes to Ensnaring Slam, that felt PvP focused, of course, as well as the Threaded Spike change. And with Warlocks, this was just more Threadlings. This, again, felt like the way to stop the Navigator, like cheese, grapple melee thing that I've been seeing a lot of Titans doing. This doesn't seem too hard. I forget what Into the Fray does, honestly, 100%. But it doesn't sound like that much of a nerf. It's just a reduction of the regeneration, whatever it is. And of course, a Banner of War, slight change. It's diminishing returns and a slight timer reduction. So again, this was with all the melee focused stuff too, which is what a lot of people were using to just abuse boss mechanics. With that, that seems appropriate. Everything on this list was, again, it felt appropriate. The one thing I will keep going back to is that Weapons of Light change. That did not feel appropriate at all. But aside from that, thank you for keeping up with me. Again, sorry if I felt sick or I sounded gross. I am doing my best to work through this. I will hopefully have a Stasis and Strand video out for Thursday and Friday. If not, you will hear it when it does. I will see you all in the next video.